الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على محمد النبي الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبعه بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. اللهم واجعلنا منهم، اللهم آمين. Inshallah, this evening we will touch on three issues that are being discussed still, and the action and the dynamic of them are still ongoing. One of them is the issue of the Sudan. The other is Mamdani and New York and the election on Tuesday. And the last one on the latest in Gaza. So basically, with the Sudan, this is not, unfortunately, the first tragedy that hits the Sudan of what many of you have seen, where many civilians, not to mention others, were killed and horrible things happened to them in the Darfur area by this rabid force headed by somebody by the name of Hamidati and supported mainly by the UAE. The Darfur area is to the west and the north of the Sudan, and it's really have a considerable size of about 500,000 square meters, while the whole of Sudan have an area of 2 million square meters. So Sudan is a huge country. And Sudan is surrounded by 9 countries. This just tells you how big is this country. It's surrounded by Egypt to the north, by Libya to the north and northwest, by Chad, northwest, and then on the west is surrounded by Ethiopia and Eritrea, and in the south, Kenya and Uganda, the Central African Republic, and the Congo. 9 countries. What did happen this week is you can look at it as a continuation of another tragedy that happened to Darfur around 2003. The story goes back to when the British left the Sudan, and to that effect left the other colonies. They left them with their soldiers, but they left their influence. So the British left 3 main problems in the Muslim world that we are still until today suffering from, that British plans and poison that was left in our own lands. One was the issue of Kashmir. They left it hanging there between India and Pakistan. Many lives were lost since then. The issue of Kashmir was left not decided when they partitioned India and Pakistan. Part of it was given to Pakistan, part to India, and small part eventually went to China. But the Jammu and Kashmir was left there. The issue in Sudan was the southern Sudan issue, because in the south of the Sudan, it's a mix of Christians and Muslims and people who do not have any religion, or they have their own religions that do not relate to the faith that go back to Ibrahim alayhi salam. And the biggest crime, of course, that they left is they brought the Zionists in Palestine. They brought hundreds of thousands of Jews from Europe. Since Europe wanted to get rid of the Jews, they brought them to Palestine and they gave them the dominance, and they allowed them to have arms and eventually kick the Palestinians out of their homes. Still, we are suffering from that. So in the Sudan, the South kept rebelling against the government in Khartoum, the old days, with the support of the Zionists and the British and among others, Ethiopia. Whoever want to weaken the Sudan would support the South in this regard. Add insult to injury is Chad, which had many civil wars. And many of those civil wars were driven through arms that came from Darfur. Because again, this Sudan is huge, so there are many points of entries for the weapons to come from Ethiopia, from Chad, from Egypt, from, just name it. Eventually, the US forced a separation between the North and the South by forcing the North to have a referendum. And although the Omar al-Bashir and his crowd from the army came with tendency for Islam, but actually they were working with the Americans. And it was an American coup that brought al-Bashir to the Sudan. And I'll give you just one aspect that you can see to it. At one point, we have so many of those organized churches in the US who were pressing George Bush, the son, to impose sanctions on the Sudan because they claim Sudan is anti-Christian, and that was not the case because Muslims were killed, the Christians were killed. But with the pressure on the White House, eventually the Bush administration have issued sanctions on the Sudan. And I still remember, wallahi, the New York Times article talking about this. They said the US administration have imposed sanctions on the Sudan, a long article. And at the end of the article, there was a paragraph. It says, exempted from the sanctions is the gum tree. Sudan export to the US a product from a gum tree that goes into Coca-Cola and Pepsi and gum and all these things. The New York Times said that the administration, the American administration, exempted the gum tree from the sanctions. And that's the only thing they said that the US takes from Sudan. So basically, the sanctions was just a propaganda for the administration to the churches that we are doing something. But actually, it was not real. And all along, the US, realizing that the South will keep bleeding the Sudan, they enforced on the government of Omar al-Bashir to have a referendum, eventually split, and then war started among the southern Sudan themselves. Even between the president and the vice president. Each one has a faction, they start killing each other, and mostly they were Christians. They were killing each other in this regard. Now, in Darfur, there were the attempts by southern Sudan and those forces of southern Sudan and others to create problems for the Sudan, and Darfur was a weak link. Because again, Sudan is huge, and the government does not have much really to control an army to control the whole of the Sudan and all the borders of 9 countries. You will need a huge army well armed. And Sudan was not. By the way, Sudan, although at one point they could not feed themselves, Sudan, according to the report by the Jamiat al-Duwal al-Arabiya, the Arab League, Sudan has a rich land that can feed the whole Arab world and export more to others. It's a bread basket that could feed the whole Arab world. You do not need any country to grow anything. But Sudan, because of, as I said, the political situation and those fights, at one point could not even feed itself. But very rich country. At one point, oil started being discovered in Sudan and gold. Now, there was a need for the government to control Sudan in the Darfur area. So they established a militia that's called Janjaweed. And Janjaweed in one narration is composed of two words, Jinni and Jawad. It says Jinni riding a horse, meaning it's a very rapid force, that they could call them, the army, slow to move. But those people, they could come quickly and do whatever the government want to do. So they establish this Janjaweed, which is, did atrocities in the Darfur in the 2003 time frame. 10 years after that, the government of Sudan put them through the mukhabarat to be under the government control. And they changed their name to the Rapid Service Force, قوات الدعم السريع. And when the Arab Spring, the so-called Arab Spring, starts spreading later on, get to the Sudan, we have the Russian Wagner Group and the Emiratis, the United Arab Emirates, start investing heavily in this rapid force. When they were under the control of the government, and Umar al-Bashir used to say, Hamidati Himayati, meaning Hamidati, who's head of this, and his group are the one who protecting me. Hamidati Himayati, very well known slogan by Umar al-Bashir, Hamidati Himayati. But when the gold and oil start coming and the Russian Wagner Group and the United Arab Emirates start pumping money and weapons, at that point, so much gold start being stolen by Hamidati and his brother and their gangs and sent to the Emirates. And that brought more money and more weapons from the Emirates to those people. To make long story short, the army eventually and this rapid force got together and got rid of al-Bashir. And the army took over. When the army took over, they put Hamidati to be the vice president. So Al-Burhan from the army became the president and Hamidati became the vice president. It worked for some time, and then the army came with this idea that this rapid force need to be part of the army, integrated within the army. And with the backing of the United Arab Emirates and the British, because the British had a major role in this, when Sudan came to the UN with this claim that United Arab Emirates are the ones who are flaming the war in the Sudan. They are the ones who are making the damage. They are the ones who are supplying weapons and this and that. Who stood and prevented this from getting to the UN Security Council? It was the British, who had influence because they are one of the 5 countries that have the veto power. But clearly the Sudan government accused, and there are many, this is not disputed, although the Emirates keep denying it. Tons of gold got from Sudan to them, and some of it went to the Russian Wagner Group to Russia. So when this issue came, and the army said that the rapid force should become part of the army, Hamidati said, no, I would not allow this. Eventually we will, but we're going to do it over 10 years. Well, because as you can realize, the United Arab Emirates have an agenda, against any entity in the Muslim world that have any sympathy toward Islam. And they realize that these people in the army now in charge, Burhan and others, those are the friends of Umar al-Bashir. Although they are the ones who deposited him with the rabid force. So they want Hamidati to be in charge. They do not want a country to have elections. They want to have basically what they did to Morsi in Egypt. Allah yarhamu. And they got this counter-revolution with the support of the Riyadh, Saudi, and United Arab Emirates and others. What happened after that is war broke between the army and the rabid force. And the army had big successes in the past few months, but those rabid force control the Khartoum airport, which is the major airport, and now they overcame a major city in Darfur called Al-Fashir. And the UN and Muslim agencies, local group, everybody agrees that big, horrible atrocities happened in the last week. This is Muslims on Muslims. Now, if you go to the social media, you hear voices saying, oh, Muslims are killing Christians. That's nonsense. That's nonsense. It's coming at the same time when Trump is saying in Nigeria, unless the Nigerian government do something, we're going to interfere militarily in Nigeria because Christians are being killed in Nigeria. And I did not do enough research really, but it does not take a good thinker to know that the Zionists also promote this thing to turn the attention from their genocide in Gaza on social media, especially that it was made public by the Israeli media, that the Israeli government is giving influencers in the US $7,500 for every post that they put to support Israel or to attack its opponents. I mean, this is facts in the Israeli media. Nobody is making this thing up because they realize that they are losing this propaganda war over what had happened in Gaza. And that's where things stand. Yes, there are countries that support the government of Sudan, like Egypt, but might not be putting its full strength because they have to take money from the Emirates. Turkey is trying to help them in this regard. At one point, they had a relationship with the Iran because Iran used to support them with money and some weapons to the government. But it's basically, in a nutshell, a war from outside forces to take control of the Sudan. They tried it in Libya. At one point, Haftar and his company, who were supported by the Emirates and Egypt, were on the verge of taking over Libya when Turkey interfered and put the balance back by supplying their drones and sending their expertise. There's also this not open, military conflict, but influence in Somalia between UAE and Turkey. So unfortunately, this saga will be there. We as Muslims, we need to realize how sacred is the life of the believer. As the Prophet ﷺ said that the life of the believer is more sacred than the Kaaba, the house of Allah. Although the Kaaba is very sacred to Allah and to every Muslim. Even beyond this, the life of every human is sacred. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, killing a human being without a justification from Allah, not from me and you, it's as if you killed the whole of humanity. And if you give life to a human being as if you gave life to the whole of humanity. Imam Ibn Hazm said that a Muslim who died defending a Christian or a Jew, Dhimmi, Christian or Jew, if he died as a shaheed. That's our culture, that's our deen. But unfortunately, this tribalism and this money that is put, oil money and gas money in the Emirates, unfortunately, are putting and spreading lots of havoc and damage in the Middle East and even beyond. For the sake of time, I'll stop about the Sudan here. I will shift to New York election and Mamdani. If you just look through the American media, I'm not even talking about, going to all those posts that are there on Facebook and Instagram and others. You see this name now as a household name. I mean, a person is running for the mayor of New York, for God's sake. He's not running to be a president of the country, or a senator, or a congressman, or a governor. He's running to be a mayor. Social media, of course, is beyond this discussion, because it's crazy there. I'll give you some of the titles in the mainstream media. Forget about the social media, mainstream media. If Mamdani is elected, the whole Jews will leave New York City. طيب. Another one. If Mamdani is elected, the New Yorkers will leave New York. Okay, rent will go down drastically, even you can rent businesses if nobody's there, right? Another headline. If Mamdani wins, the whole capital, the money, would leave New York. We become poor city. Another post. Israel export to New York City $5 billion each year. Of course, 5 billion of them are diamonds and the other that are stolen from Africa. Israel is very famous to be a hub for theft. Anyone who commits a crime in the US and in Russia and this, any Jew, where he goes, he fled to Israel with all his stolen stuff. And all of this is for somebody who's running for a mayor. Why? Because this guy insists that I am a Muslim. I'm not here to abandon my faith. I stand by my faith. Israel is committing genocide. If Netanyahu comes to New York, I will arrest him. Wow. I mean, imagine, would this fly before October 7th? You would hear somebody who's running for a mayor in New York saying, if Netanyahu comes here, I would arrest him. Now, why this is important and why so much is being said and so much money, tens of millions of dollars being put in this campaign. And of course, the tens of millions are supporting his opponents. Now, as a background, some of you might know the story, some of you might not. But he ran on a Democratic ticket. Who ran with him on a Democratic ticket? Two of the most corrupted politicians in the history of New York City. Adams and Cuomo. I mean, those guys, well known. Remember, Adams had to ask Trump to pardon him because he was going to go to jail. And Trump pardoned him. So anyway, the election took place to see who's the Democratic nominee. And naturally, Mamdani had a big win. At that point, Como said that he would run as an independent, because now the Democratic ticket will be represented by Mamdani. So Como, of course, with others encouraging him, will give you the millions, we'll give you, just don't worry, we'll support you. And same thing, other support, especially of those Zionists and their clowns in Wall Street, start pumping millions of dollars to Adams and to Como for their independent campaign. Now, there's a Republican, Salwa, who's also running to be a mayor, but Republicans really have no chance in New York. But this guy insists he wants to stay in the race. They try to convince them to leave. So at least it will be between Como and Mamdani, and the votes will go to Como. Adams eventually pulled out. Not sure what was the deals, but deals were made. Salwa refused to move out, so basically the election on Tuesday will be between three people to be the next mayor of New York. Now, you should see the smear campaign and all those AI-generated videos and lies and even it get to the point that Como himself, his campaign, have taken one of those AI-generated videos. Eventually, of course, they removed it. But at one point, they put it there, making fun of this Mamdani. This guy is from India, and he eats with his hand, and you know, as if now, you know, that this guy is not civilized, you know, he's not like us. And they bring a quote from his mother that this guy is not an American, you know. Yeah, he's not American, he have one wife, he does not have girlfriends. I'm sure they digged up his history. If they found him with girlfriends or on drugs, on alcohol, it will be all over the news. But they digged his past and they did not find anything. So what do you want to say about this? Oh, he is Hamas. He is jihadi. He is pro-intifada. He wants to globalize the intifada. He is anti-Semitic. He is anti-Israel. He is, and it's not working. There's a good number of young Jews in New York who are going to vote for him. There are rabbis in New York who are supporting him. Of course, we are not talking about those Zionists who claim to look for the interest of the U.S., although they do not really care a bit about the interest of the U.S. Their main concern is Israel. And if you have seen Trump giving this talk in the Knesset, he talked about this Miriam Ederson, who husband used to own all those gambling places, and they have billions of dollars. He said, I asked her a question, which one you love the most, America or Israel? He said she did not answer. But he said, I know her answer. She loves Israel most. Well, you know, they are not fooling anybody but themselves in this regard. And what's also interesting in all of this, it's coming at a time when the right wing in this country, people who are on the right, start awakening to the reality of what the Zionists in Palestine are all about and what's their supporters in the U.S. all about. I mean, imagine this, Trump saying Israel used to control Congress. They no longer control Congress. I mean, this is the president. This is the president of the United States saying, and this is public, not that somebody, that he said it in a place, in a private conversation. No. That Israel used to control Congress, they no longer control Congress. Another bombshell that's hitting now those Zionists in America and in Palestine at the same time. At one point we discussed this Heritage Foundation report, the 2025. And this 2025 report or agenda that they put together for Trump when he became a president, they have been working on it for many years, and they start implementing it. Basically, trying to enforce the view of the right wing within the government, using all tools to fight what the right wing is against. You remember the first thing that Trump did when he became a president, he signed this thing against the DEI, the diversity, equality, and inclusion. Telling the companies that what Obama and Biden were working on, that's a no-no. And telling the universities and the companies not to do this. Don't give proportion to blacks and Hispanics and women and this and this and this and that. This among other things. But mostly get the government in the future to be pro the right wing of politics, meaning the Republicans and their base. And we have seen some of those people being in the government and implementing this Project 2025. But the most shocking was this Esther project that this foundation came up with some of the Zionists who did not see beyond their noses. They came basically with this Esther project to Trump to use all means, including courts, legals, cutting funding from universities and this, to face the so-called anti-Semitism wave in the US. Now that was a big trick, because the wise Jews in this country and in Israel warn their own people, saying, this is not to eliminate or fight anti-Semitism. This is to use anti-Semitism as a tool to control the universities in the US, and to control the corporations in the US, and to control the narratives of the US. This is not a favor for anti-Semitism. And of course, those who only see up to their noses, they ignored, they went along. So the shocking thing was, and many of you are aware, we talked about that Carlson now is a main figure in the right wing in the USA, who is exposing the Zionists and their plots and their plans and what they are trying to do, and how they use the US not just to milk them out of money, but to get them involved in wars. They also publicized that when Charlie Kirk was killed, that just before he was killed, Jews who have money came to him and said, you need to exclude Tucker Carlson and Green from your space where he can, they can be interviewed and they come to his conferences. And he refused, they took their money. So what happened is Carlson invited this guy who's called Fuentes, if I'm pronouncing the right pronunciation. So this Fuentes guy, he's like in his late 20s, very well known anti-Semitic, very well known Holocaust denier, inviting him for an interview. And of course, the Zionists and their supporters went berserk. I mean, you know, what's happening? But that was not the bombshell. The bombshell was that the head of the Heritage Foundation, who they thought is working on their agenda, came out in a video and saying Carlson in support, he came in support of Carlson, and he said about Fuentes, this guy should be giving a platform, we should debate him. I mean, that really is driving them crazy. With Mamdani on the verge of, most likely, according to many predictions, to defeat Como on Tuesday. And the story will continue. Let me just say a few things about what's happening in Gaza, because basically what we discussed last week is still the main news. Netanyahu went to visit this center that the US established to observe the situation in Gaza, and he gave the impression that he's the one in control, which was, of course, even the Israeli media says that's a false narrative. He's not. The US is driving the truck now. He's a passenger, observing. The US have sent top guns in their political establishment to go there to be sure that the Israelis are not and will not damage what the US is trying to do. The new thing is that even this week, they are sending the head of the national intelligence to go there. So basically, they are not leaving them because they know that they are trying any venue to break the ceasefire and to go back to war and to take the initiative. And the US will not allow them. There is still talk of who will participate in Gaza, you know, which country will contribute forces. But one of the main obstacles that came this week is that Israel said we will resume the war unless all the Hamasis get out of the areas where the Israelis are in control. And Hamas agreed to leave through corridors established by the Red Cross so that they would not even have any contact with the Israeli army. Because that was another trick that they said, unless they leave the areas, because there are areas, if you have seen, there's the yellow line, and there's the red line, and there's the white line. So the Israelis have withdrawn to this so-called yellow line. So they are still in control of Rafah in the south. And there are many Hamasis there. And Netanyahu wants to convince the Israeli public that he is in control, that he has taken the initiative, and this and that. And then this scandal came, which made the whole political establishment going around themselves. When it turned out that the second woman to become major general in the Israeli army and was in charge to be the top lawyer or prosecutor, if you like, in the army, or Shalimi, came on Friday and admitted that she's the one who authorized the release of the video of the torture of a Palestinian prisoner by 10 Israeli reserve soldiers in Sdi Tliman prison. And this horrible video that showed 10 people, this is the cameras of the prison itself, torturing and breaking the bones of this Palestinian prisoner and raping him and damaging his body. And there was a doctor report after that that lists all the damage that happened to his body. For the last year, the establishment, Netanyahu and his criminals who surround him, they have been trying to figure out who released that video. I mean, imagine Netanyahu said this is the most damaging piece that had affected the Israelis, not just the army, but the country in the past 75 years. He said, I do not remember anything that did so much damage. Because it shows that this torture is going on in the Israeli prisons. And if the government does not take a stand against them, then the International Criminal Court will start proceeding against them. Just like they start the proceeding against Netanyahu and Gallant themselves. And if you remember, when those people were taken to court, accused of torturing this Palestinian prisoner, and tortures all over the prisons, by the way, but this video was released to the public. There were some also pictures were released on CNN by one Jewish doctor who went there and took the pictures and released into the CNN, which again, horrible torture that is happening inside the prisons. So for the past year, they were trying to figure out who did it. Even the right extremists, right-wing extremists, they tried to go to the courts and to try to prison and release those soldiers, saying basically, you know, they were torturing Palestinians, who cares? For the last year, they were looking for who is the person who released it. And they could not figure it out until recently, when an assistant to Urshalimi was trying to get a promotion. Part of the promotion, they required her to take a lie detector test. When this lie detector test was conducted, it became clear that the office of Urshalimi is the one who released the video. She came out and admitted that she is the one, meaning Urshalimi. This is Major General. I mean, this is a very, very high place in the army, that yes, I am the one who released it. And it just shows that still there are, you know, some humans among those unhuman IDF who they try to sell to the world that they are the most moral, and they are the most immoral army in the world. We have seen the pictures of the torture, the genocide in Gaza, and all of this. So the damage is already done. So the country is going around itself with this scandal. Not to mention the National Security Advisor was fired. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase their problems from within, so they will be busy with themselves. Finally, some quotes of audios were released this week on the anniversary of the killing of Ishaq Rabin. It's the 30th anniversary. And in some of these audios, he was saying that, you know, we will need to maintain our strength, and we will negotiate, but it seems that this was just a tactic at one point before they get to Oslo, and they were not serious about giving the Palestinians anything. But what is interesting in those audios is that saying Israel cannot do it on her own. Without the US, we cannot do it. If we need to maintain our strength, it's only the US that can support us. And this is an issue that we have been talking about, that this is what the Quran says, حَبْلْ مِنَ اللَّهِ وَحَبْلْ مِنَ النَّاسِ. They will have an entity or any dignity on their own, any strength on their own, only with a rope from Allah or a rope from the people. The rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has been cut long time ago when they rebelled against Allah by denying Isa alayhi salam. Jesus was the Messiah. By them making kufr in Isa and accusing his mother of all sorts of things, from that point they became kuffar. And when the Prophet ﷺ came and they deny his message. So there is no rope, help from Allah. What remains is help from people. And this is what Ishaq Rabin was talking about. How long this rope will be coming from the US now remain to be seen. Because we have seen the landscape is really shaken from under their foot. And I think there are plenty of evidence to show that the US government is helping in this regard to weaken their influence in America. Because Trump does not want any country, neither Russia, nor China, nor Saudi, nor what have you, nor Israel to have any serious influence in the US to direct their policy. That's what they are working for. And that's on the long term will be very important to the future of this criminal entity in Palestine. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring the khair and the good for the ummah and to give hidayah for the rest of the humanity. Allahumma ameen. We have a question or comment, inshallah. Time for one question or comment. Yes. Well, in Palestine, there are three segments of the Palestinian society. There's a segment that lives in the West Bank, and those carry Palestinian passports. Although they do not have an actual state, but the US has designed this passport and pushed this passport and accept this passport for travel. And then the Palestinians of Gaza, which again, just the same thing as in the West Bank, but there's a big chunk of land between the two, so they cannot go. And there's a third section of the Palestinian in the historical Palestine who are called the Palestinians of the 1948. Those Palestinians did not leave when the tragedy of 1948, the catastrophe, Nakba, took place, where 750,000 Palestinians were driven out of their land by committing atrocities in villages and erasing 600 villages and killing so many people. Many people fled to Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, and to the West Bank. Those who remain in the 1948, they got Israeli citizenship, which now they call it a big mistake that we left them, meaning that they should have killed them or deported them. And at this moment, they are about 15–20% of the population, and they used to have 15 members of the Knesset. Until a few years back, there was not a law that officially discriminated against them. Of course, they will discriminate against them in terms of housing and services and this and this and that. I mean, it's easy to see it. You go to Jerusalem, on the left of a street, you will see so many houses without water tanks on the ceiling. And you look on the right, the houses have 10, 15, 20, 30 water tanks. Why? Because water used to flow always to the Jewish side but not to the Arab side. It will fly, come twice. So the discrimination have been all along, there is. But became official when the Knesset voted for Israel to be a Jewish state. Meaning if you are living under, even if you have a citizenship, which the Arabs in 1948 have, you are not Jewish, you are a second-class citizen. That's the background. Any final comment or question, inshallah, before we close? Jazakum. Yes? That's a good question. Why the UAE, why the Emirates are doing all those atrocities in the Muslim countries? What's in it for them? I mean, we have seen them establishing this Hindu temple, and we have seen an official of the Emirati coming and touching the cow. They brought a cow from India, and of course the Hindus were touching the cow to get the barakah, the blessing of the cow. And I mean, there are videos with officials from the UAE government touching this cow to get the blessings of it. I mean, simply put, there is this guy, his name is Muhammad Dahlan. He used to be in charge of security of the Palestinian Authority. He had this fight with Abbas. Abbas eventually got rid of him from Fatah. They kicked him out of Fatah. He went to the Emirates. Now he's their leading man of stirring trouble in the Muslim countries, of where any Islamic tendency, if you smell any Islamic tendency in any Muslim country, you will find them sending money and weapons to kill it. There's no doubt that they were the main force with money and support behind the removal and this, movement against mercy. May Allah have mercy on him in Egypt. They are the main force behind Haftar in Libya. They are the main force behind the trouble in the Sudan, as we explained. In Syria, they tried until the last minute not to accept the Shara, because they have problem with Turkey. They think that Turkey is working on a different agenda of trying to get this more Islam into the Muslim countries. And they see that this thing does not go along with their agenda. That's why they have boycotted and surrounded Qatar, and at one point were planning with Saudi to invade Qatar because of Al Jazeera and because of Qatar money and influence with some of the Islamic groups or parties around the world. And when the Qatari government realized that the US and the British, although they have bases there, they will not protect Qatar, Tamim ended up going to Turkey, signing a defense agreement with Turkey. The parliament approved it on the same day, and the next day the Turkish tanks were in Doha. And that's when the United Arab Emirates stopped its plan to take over Qatar. So basically, their money in Iraq, in the elections, big money that the UAE contributes in there. So unfortunately, they have an agenda. In fact, they used to have a group called Mu'minun Bila Hudud, believers without boundaries. It used to be based in Morocco and Jordan. And those people basically do research, which is clearly aimed at getting the people out of Islam. They want to, without boundaries, discuss even Allah and the essence of Islam. They said there's no subject, beyond. We'll discuss the Quran. Basically, it's a kufr. And subhanallah, how, as I was mentioning in one khatira, how things sometimes are done without even our effort as Muslims. So this guy in Jordan, who was the head of the office, that the Emirates supplying them with money and publications, People, of course, intellectuals attack them. You are a tool in the hands of the Emirat. You are just, being used against Islam and this and this and that. So one day, this guy who's the head of the office claimed that some people abducted him, tortured him, because torture was, there were some injuries on him, and he accused the Islamists in Jordan, the ones who did it to him. And of course, the government took this issue seriously and started looking for those who abducted him and tortured him. And the government discovered that this guy have asked his nephew to bring some injuries to his face and to his head, and he is the one who made this whole plan. Big scandal. So they did it to themselves. Alhamdulillah, nobody had need to do any work in this regard. But that's basically what it is. Any smell of any Islamic tendency in any country. In fact, they came even to the US and put money to try to fight Islam in America. I remember in 2017, and we close with this inshallah. In 2017, the United Arab Emirates put 50 organizations in the world on the list of terrorist organizations. 50 organizations. Guess who in the US, the terrorist organization that the United Arab Emirates wanted to fight? CARE? Who else? ISNA and MAS. I mean, this just tells you something. This tells you something. I understand if they're going to put ISIS and MISIS and TISIS, but ISNA and MAS and CARE, this just tells you that they do not want to have a smell of Islam anywhere. And they are willing to put tons of money for that. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala either give hidayah or take whoever is plotting against this deen. Allahumma ameen. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت